welcome back to the KQL Café. We are doing a re-recording because I missed to press the recording button 2 months ago. So we want to welcome our guest Mona Ghadiri to our KQL Café, and she will be talking about AI Copilot KQL security stuff. So welcome, Mona.
Yeah, no. Hi everybody. Great to see you guys again. Yep, I'm Mona Ghadiri, three-time Microsoft MVP here, hanging out with you guys talking about, the intersections of AI security and security for AI, I guess is the way I'll
Ooh.
put it. And kind of trying to move past this like honeymoon and like toy AI phase of things to getting to like building things that are scalable and would work in scenarios like multi-tenant environments or in environments where you have to have, sovereignty, taken into consideration, right? There's a much bigger world out there than just saying, hey, this works, right? And that's, hey, this works for some of the most, hardest problems we have to solve. And so I wanted to start with like a little analogy, which you guys, were smiling about, when I told it last time, right? Which is, if we look to biology as an opportunity to learn about anything, and this, applies to writing KQL and it applies to, making AI agents just the same, right? If you were a zookeeper and you were going to make a zoo of creatures, would you be better off making a zoo of animals where, when they're born, they're able to run immediately, which means, they need a very discrete set of things. And, you don't really need to worry about, sending the horse to horse school to learn how to talk because there's only one Mr. Ed, and that, it was a TV show, a long time ago in the United States, right? Or you could be a zookeeper that says, look, I'm going to have these animals that take a lot of care up front, little pink shriveled creatures when they're born, right? My favorite is like, kangaroo or panda bear or humans, right? Where it takes a lot of teaching and learning to actually get to good, to get to a place where you could say, I actually trust my kid to walk to the corner store is not, the first week of their life, right? My kid's like 6 and I still don't let them do that. So I know you guys have similar experiences, right? So whether you're a zookeeper or a parent, there's a lot in common here, right? But the idea is that as you think about these AI agents and the resource management required for a lot of them, you have to think about it like a zoo. And if you design things to be able to do some things immediately, you're going to lose out on being able to, train or teach those things later on because their capacity to learn is limited because you've chosen preconditioned things that make them better or faster immediately so that they can run away from their prey because there is no horses if you can't run away, right? It's kind of a key part of being a horse. So it's okay to be building AI agents, right, that maybe have an initial set of capabilities that immediately when you deploy them, they're incredibly useful, right? Same for KQL queries, right? But even if I think about taking a parameters file or a watch list and coding as variables instead of coding as, my risky devices group, right? Coding instead of, device group, blah, 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 to like, at risky device groups, right? I have a much higher likelihood of hitting potential matches, right? Than if I had coded just specifically for that one, device group that I had originally picked, right? So this way I can have 20 risky device groups that are all risky for different reasons, but also referenced in the same parameters file. And now suddenly I have a lot more flexibility in my detections, or parallel to AI agents, right? By making those choices up front, like coding with variables or choosing to have parameters files instead of coding those into the detections themselves, right? Oh, what a different zoo we have. So as you are creating your first AI agents and as you're kind of working through this world of like, well, what do I want to build? Maybe what you want to build is a detection engineering helper tool. And, when I think about detection engineering, even itself, right, there's 3 or 4 different use cases, right? Do you want something that will always be able to help you make new detections? Well, then I need to know what your SOPs are for your regular detection processes. I need to know if you know about the latest ASIM update that Ofer just published, I think yesterday, that came out, right? And I'm going to be training it on very different information than, hey, every time I write a KQL query, I want you to make it better, right? It's a very different process to create something that is an improvement agent, right? Where its job is to look at all of your detections that you've written over the course of time and say the ones that have, the best performance for X, Y, and Z reasons are these. And ergo, you wrote these 3 detections that didn't use the parameter file, and you need to go back and fix those 3 detections because, if they don't reference the parameter file, then we don't have a scalable, detection. So those are just some examples of ways to think about the design process behind even just building something that's there to help you with KQL, because something is building them natively from nothing versus one that's job it is to help you improve the things that you've written already may feel like the same thing, but I promise you in the AI world, they are not, right? They take very different training data, very different tuning processes, very different security parameters, right? Because when we let it create things from scratch, we're giving it a lot more control, right? Than if it's only curating, right? Or assisting or QAing, right? Work we've already created. So I think that's another big divide, right? People love vibe coding. They love, vibe hunting, right? This ability to like write your own natural language, whatever, and have it magically return results, right? I think we're all like of the opinion that like it's a cool party trick, right? But in my analogy of like, is it a horse or is it a kangaroo? Where it's like going to be in its mom's belly for 6 months and then maybe come out, but be able to kick you in the face so hard that you could potentially die, right? It's a very different. It's a very different experience.
So if you look back, like in your day of life, let's say 1 year or 2 years ago, compared to today, what has changed for you now that we have all these AI and agents and, specifically to some activities that you were doing as SOC, like, detection engineering or threat hunting? Can you maybe give a practical example?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I think about the kind of key barriers to entry to doing threat hunting, you think about storage, right? And how expensive it used to be to store anything, and how hard it was to collect streamed event data and somehow replicate it somewhere else, right? To be able to parse it or process it in some capacity. Even the ability to do, front end parsing before things got to a SIEM a couple of years ago wasn't even a thing, right? So we have kind of this storage change that I feel like has represented a monumental shift in both the way we write detections and the way that we do threat hunting. I think the second is around how much better Microsoft has gotten around threat intelligence and bringing that threat intelligence kind of natively in. We used to have to do so much to just bring in good threat intelligence data. I don't know, however many of you have fought with like sticks or taxi data in your life or try to get it into the right formats, like
slow APIs.
Yeah, junky APIs, bad credential management, more places to do, API management and gateway management, types of things, key rotation, credential change, right? It's just like all of it just adds up, right? Both in the license cost to buy the threat intelligence tools, most of which who have been bought up by other competitors at this point, right? Recorded Future got picked up by Microsoft. Sorry, not by Microsoft, by MasterCard, right? We had, Microsoft pick up Risk IQ, right? So many of these, changes, have happened over the last, 2 years that I think threat intelligence has been an information highway that Microsoft has capitalized on, both by being the ones who got attacked all the time and are getting attacked all the time, and translating those things into more tangible value for clients. So way to, do some spin, right, on taking the fact that you're attacked all the time and turning that into something that you can sell to other people. The third and last thing, kind of around detection engineering that has changed, I think, is the kind of SIEM-as-Code revolution. So 3, 4, or 5 years ago, right? Storing your code, your detections as code in a repository was still relatively a brand new thing. Very few SOC engineers knew how to do CI/CD pipelines and knew how to manage their own repos, or knew how to do, kind of the DevOps side of code maintenance, and even just simple things like merging, branch management, versioning, right? Just really basic things. We've been doing it in like software engineering for years that just never made it into the world of SOC, security operations or SOC engineering until very, very recently. So now you couple having the this amazing power to store things, and now we can store things and process them so cheaply and so quickly that half of the things that were there 3 years ago are obsolete, coupled with this idea that threat intelligence is now more interconnected than ever before. And Microsoft has all these partnerships with all these other firms now that are doing threat intelligence. And, this last piece that I just talked about, I mean, it's a whole new world, right? And we have this amazing opportunity now with MCP servers and additional software, types of integrations to capitalize on this SIEM-as-Code revolution, and bring everybody around to this world of cloud native application protection, runtime protection. Those are the SOX problems too. Those aren't just problems that exist in a vacuum. And we have such an opportunity to bring all the things from infrastructure, from threat intelligence, and from software engineering and cloud infrastructure to bear on the new design of the SOC of the future. So Alex, I'm going to ask you, right? You're SOC of the future. You get to build a brand new thing. What's the number one feature of the last few years where you're like, if I'm going to build a SOC, it's going to be built around this next best thing that I think is going to change the world? What's your answer?
Well, I definitely see that there's going to be a change. While previously in the Microsoft world, if you are a detection engineer, probably KQL is a skill. I believe that now also terms like MCP and agents probably is also a skill. At least I see. I'm not 100% sure whether it should be the SOC analyst or the threat hunting specialist to develop those. But I think knowing what it can do and maybe tell someone who is an expert in building and mingling and bringing that stuff together so that he can build the tools for you that you need is definitely something. I guess every SOC has to think about. Well, not every SOC, even not all companies have as we know it, a SOC, right? Be it an internal security operations team. But I guess leveraging that power that is available. But in the end, I was recently listening to a podcast, I think from Merrill.
And I saw him last week.
If you use the MCP server, basically either he's going to call out some APIs, right, or he's going to trigger some KQL, if I understood it correctly. You just enter natural language, and it does it for you. But I believe that doesn't take away that you still should know the fundamentals. So if you doubt your responses, that you still can maybe execute the KQL yourself.
Subject matter expertise is still, I think, required in this near-term future of ours. Gianni, what's your SOC of the future built around? What are you designing your next SOC around? What's the feature that's going to change everything for you?
Great question. I think if I would build something, it's a lot of small contextualized agents. So everything you can define in a SOC, I would build an agent for. So for instance, if there's a 4625 event in Windows, failed sign in, I want to have one agent with the context just for that specific event ID to make sure that it knows exactly if 4625, then he knows what to do, then he has the context, the right model, because models also change. And if you have your home built agent with the right model and if it's small issues, or small items to check, and then have a ton of those to make sure that everything that is happening is monitored. So you have your Sentinel MCP, you have your Defender MCP. Last month or 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, they launched the Atomic Red Team MCP. Now you
That's
can
right.
do really cool things, make really atomic
Mm-hmm.
small things, so they work together. You have one nice manager who controls all the small agents.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because if you make a agent with a large context, with a large scope, then it will give you 1,000 of different answers, and you want to have it really small and contextualized. I think that would be a nice aim to have.
Yeah, I think that's definitely like such a big change, right? I mean, I think about like a SOC analyst typing in questions even to an MCP server, and I'm just like, no, I don't want that. I don't think that's not my design. Like, I think that having people type anything in is still the wrong concept, right? Because at the end of the day, like, I still feel like my ability to write a better question than the average Joe about investigating incident, sorry, the Windows Event ID that what was it, 426, whatever it was,
4625, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it isn't even just about creating the agent; it's about managing the prompts. And when I think about managing the prompts, I think about managing content. And when I think about managing content, it's the same thing as building block number 3, right? That a lot of people did for content engineering, which is creating and manifesting the best format, right? For people to write good detections, right? And creating the right format to ask the questions to get the right operators, right? Even used could be a very, very nuanced way to write a question. Whether I get an and or an or, right, in the KQL is still determined by how I ask the question. And so someone like you, Alex or Gianni, right, I think still hold the keys to knowing how to ask the right question because you have the semantic wherewithal, to know how to do these things better than other people will. I gotta grab my charger because my computer's gonna die, and I did not prepare for this. So think about your next question that you want to ask me. I need 2 seconds. I gotta go grab it.
Yes.
Now we have to break. You can bring in your commercial in the recording.
We'll put up a picture of France. Oh, but I think, Alex, it's a lot of cool things happening in agent space at the moment.
Yeah, it's just, I think the other challenge is, I mean, SOC people have to primarily watch what's happening. So I guess also finding a balance between, bringing new stuff versus if you are just on duty, you don't have stuff to play. Also, I mean, in our lab environment, everything is cool and geeky, but, when it comes to production, it's like with detection rules, right? You want to first test them and be really sure before you put them on sharp or in production because you want to avoid call-outs of your colleagues in the middle of the night for a badly written detection. The other challenge I see, of course, everything is evolving so fast. So, I mean, by the time you understand how those things work, and again, time to production does need a certain time. And there I definitely see a challenge for, basically for any security operations team to keep up with the constant changes. I was just talking to Gianni, Mona. One other challenge I see is between all these geekness, but also having to run a steady state SOC, right? And you cannot just throw, half-ready experimental stuff constantly to a SOC because you want to avoid call-outs, unnecessary ones. You need to do fine-tuning. And I see the same for agents, right? So the time from bring in a new agent until you trust that agent and you trust it to basically take or, support your SOC analyst with something probably needs a certain, elapsed time. There there I definitely also see yet another challenge ahead. Basically, for every security operations team, how to deal with, between development and bring those things into production. Yeah, like you had to fine tune a KQL query. You now saw, if you use an agent to support you, you also have to get to that level of trust where you say, okay, now we're good. Yeah. Not sure what you think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, man, I feel like that is a lot to cover, but I do feel like we have a huge opportunity here to rethink all of it. I mean, everything down to how we staff. The people behind some of these things. Because I think in the past we had like lots of disjointed groups of people kind of working on different parts of this problem. Would you agree?
Well, it depends actually how long you look back, because if you look back when I was young, there was this
Younger.
one IT team, and the IT team did everything. They did IT, they did networks, they did security, they did everything. And then at one point they got split up, and you had the IT team, you had the network team, you have the
Infrastructure got split out, cloud got split out, identity got split out, right? I mean,
security got
that's
lost.
all these shared responsibility matrices now. And I've also seen some folks just like they organize the teams around the Microsoft licenses, right? They're like, we handle the identity licenses, we handle modern work, we deal with Azure, right? And it is just that like cut and dry based on the vendor partner, right? And so like, oh, I only do Azure infrastructure stuff, right? And I don't do anything else, right? And then you end up with people who can't, design anything across any of the silos. They're really good if all you're asking for is identity and access management agents, right? But suddenly when you start saying, well, okay, well, what kind of conditional access policies are you actually trying to create or modify or update? Suddenly it's not just the identity people who are involved. It's all of the other people whose job it is to say, well, so should somebody have SAP access at home on their personal device? Is there ever a reason to do something like that? And one could argue no, but I'm sure somebody out there has a very, very real reason why they need to be able to do that. Right? So being able to think through even something like a conditional access policy really does require a ton of different input from different parties. Or you end up with, a decentralized model where the inverse happens. Everybody gets to write their own conditional access policies, only to find that, silly things have happened, where people have, done all kinds of crazy things with their conditional access policies and locked themselves out or locked out all their admins, because they were just playing around or didn't understand, some of the implications of some of these things.
Or reach the limit of, I believe it's 190 CA policies.
That's right. I think it's 190 or something.
Yeah, which, by the way, to bring some KQLing, I mean, it's not a secret anymore, but just for those who didn't know, if you have a lot of users and you have too many CA policies, that can massively blow up your storage size for your log ingestion. There's a little trick. If to project away your conditional access policy details out of those logs, which can make a huge difference. I also see it now even as a recommendation coming up in the SOC optimization reports. Yeah. And yeah, maybe to look back now, back to agents again. Yeah, I mean, I can imagine also more agents to help not only with the detection per se, but also with the things like infrastructure hygiene, things like optimization. Actually, I see a lot.
I spent a lot of time on that, like troubleshooting collectors, troubleshooting, different log sources not making to the right tables. The detections themselves never firing or firing randomly or what feels rather random.
And there I
Even,
do
yeah,
see a huge
absolutely.
potential, because first of all, it's all, mostly read only, going to act yet, right?
Oh my
So
gosh, or who's
yeah,
ever had a phone scanner blow up one of their tables before with just garbage?
yeah,
Like, those are the kinds of things, right? I think to your point, right, where it's almost like this health and hygiene kind of side of things where it's like nobody's sock is ever budgeted to go and like clean up the stuff on the floor. And
mm,
so no one ever does it because it's not part of their job, right? Or the inverse happens where you end up with an incredibly bloated team of people whose job it is to go and turn the hose back on when the hose turns off, right?
mm,
Which is an incredibly inefficient thing. We could do that with a sensor instead of requiring a person to sit and watch them every day, right? But there are people who, going back to your KQL point, right, don't have detections written for, canary alerts, or they don't have a set of detections that are really not necessarily security focused, but are focused on the health and status and well-being of the detections and the logs
mm,
themselves. So I think for those of us who are just thinking about their KQL library as being predominantly a security, benchmark or set of use cases, my goodness, you have an amazing opportunity to improve the content with content, which feels, very reciprocal to some degree. But yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for us to step back and say, KQL can be used for more than just threat detection. It's actually just really good at finding things.
yeah,
And so we have a massive opportunity for those of us who are, SIM purists, to look at Sentinel and the events that we're already ingesting for security reasons for very, very other pertinent use cases like health, status, and availability.
yeah. So Microsoft, at Ignite, they announced this thing about E5 benefits, right,
Oh
for security
yeah,
co-pilots.
absolutely. Everybody's
Um,
getting Copilot now.
yeah,
Security
I mean,
Copilot.
I believe maybe this big wall, or this big payment wall might get a little bit lower, at least for people to at least give it a try without. I mean, if you have a couple of thousand licenses, that still gives you a couple of hundred SCUs, right? That you would
Yeah,
basically
but
get for
this
free.
goes back to my prompt
Yeah,
library problem,
yeah,
right? If you have a bunch of people typing in a bunch of nonsense because they don't understand how to ask a good question
yeah,
and have no repeatability because those same questions that they may ask multiple times in a row are being retyped or rewritten, God forbid. I'm crying even thinking about how many SCUs are wasted because
yeah,
of poor linguistic choices or people who like honestly treat it like Google. Like most of the time when I'm doing conversational I don't have the question right the first time. It's a brainstorming exercise to get to the right answer, and it takes quite a few iterations, oftentimes, to get anywhere close to the right answer. So I
yeah,
really think that getting this, paywall, to your point, Alex, removed is amazing. But what tokens we decide to spend our coin or our on at the arcade, right? And the games that we have there, it's still a huge problem. I can have somebody who goes and spends $10 or €10 on one stupid game that all they get to do is spin the wheel one time.
yeah,
And there's
yeah,
50 choices and 49 of them are shit,
yeah,
right? I think we have an amazing opportunity to say, look, there's only 10 questions you get to ask. And right, this is seen in Microsoft's it's a custom guidebooks SOP agent, right? Where the whole concept is there to help you extend the questions that pop up on the side in the Defender console around what specific prompts you may want your analysts to be able to trigger.
yeah,
So now I have a better SOP driven, there you go, a better SOP driven way to do things. So instead of just like every time I load an incident, the incident summary immediately pops up, I
yeah,
can have it so it does something else first instead, right? Or I have it create different information based on the things that I care about. And this unlocks a massive amount of use cases. I mean, you were just thinking about, the KQL basics, but I mean, I think about beyond even the triage and configuration stuff, to really thinking about triage and analysis, incident response, some of the continuous improvement stuff. I think definitely is real, but I think at the end of the day, we need a better list of things that quantify like what good looks like. So if you did pick one of these custom guidebooks, are you trying to save time? Are you trying to gain time back? Are you trying to gain visibility? Are you trying to gain accuracy? Right? Or are you trying to, get, resilience in, your breach containment strategy? And any one of those are going to drive a very different direction in how you may want to use those custom guidebooks, because I may say for P1 severity, high level severity, I want a custom guidebook that goes directly into incident response options, right? Rather than, oh, this one came in as my, I have a top 10 list of bad baddies that always fire benign true positives that like just make my life miserable.
And you
And
probably
so
also want to, like you mentioned before, either by people entering useless stuff in your prompt and burning SCUs for that. And I guess the same question is also, well, if I have an incident, do I really want to use an SCU to run a simple KQL query, or would I not just have the KQL query
absolutely, right?
run
This allows us to
automatically?
leapfrog over that. Exactly.
As a
So if I
logic
have
app or
automation that's
yeah,
already doing
yeah,
the incident summary, for example, I don't
yeah,
want to throw that away.
yeah,
It's much cheaper to do that with automation than it is to do it with AI anyways, right? And then to your point, right, I'd much rather have the summary written the way that I have to write the summary as a SOC agent at Bloody Block Company, right? Following my own incident template, right, than what the incident template is that, Microsoft is going to use themselves. Right? So even like nuanced things like that, where you wouldn't really notice unless you were really a SOC analyst, I think are going to be the things that make a big difference. So, yeah, I think that that's the customization piece that I was missing for, this kind of addition to the E5 license, right? Is you can't just have it run on everything, right? You really have to be able to use this custom guidebooks, kind of SOP style way of doing things so that you only use the agents when it's necessary and treat it more like a surgical laser that costs $10,000 every time you turn it on, than, a light that you turn on when you go into a room.
yeah,
Very
yeah,
different costs,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Very different utilization costs, right? So, but yeah, that's a great call out.
But in any case, I'm optimistic that it's from a completely, oh, this is so expensive to even start, that with this little, let's call it indirect funding. I mean, in the end, we're all paying for it anyway.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
who
yeah,
cares, right? It's
yeah,
just funny money. No, but I think you're right. The barrier to entry and having it be, at least conceptually included makes people more curious, right? Our
yeah,
opportunity now, and I think, this is one of those like, why did AI agents fail? Like, why did, I think that MIT report that came out in, what is it? Was it July or something? It was like 95% of enterprise AI projects fail. But I think it's honestly more about bad business objectives, misalignment with like trying to apply AI to things that aren't like that maybe are day-to-day business operations but don't qualify as actually useful for AI, or lack of the ability for these things to adapt, right? The horse problem from the beginning, right? If there's no adaptive learning to get to better context, right? Then, we're kind of hosed. I think the other problems I've seen have all been around like leadership visibility into evolving the outcomes as AI matures and continues to go and do its own thing. But I also have been circulating, and I present about this at Ignite, the idea of having a Gen AI risk reference architecture and a security monitoring blueprint actually for any of these AI agents. And so I was hoping I could share that with you guys a little bit while we have a little bit of time, if that's okay.
yeah, sure. Yeah, and speaking about blueprints, I believe it's even public. There should now also come out a new blueprint for the whole Sentinel and data lake and MSSP blueprint and whatsoever. Yeah,
100%. Yeah,
yeah,
I think I heard about that as well.
yeah.
I'll go into screen sharing mode. So, this has been something I've been circulating with some folks internally. It's called the GenAI risk reference architecture. We had some folks internally map OWASP top 10, NIST AI RMF, EU AI Act, and say, what are the use cases that actually are represented in all of the controls that are applicable for all of these different frameworks. And it turns out there are 16, which feels like a lot, but they represent different personas, which you can see I color-coded here in the bottom, purple, blue, and green. But what I tried to do is say, if you are a detection engineer and someone comes up to you and says, we have to build a bunch of detections for AI stuff, what do we build? You can take this and say, these could be all of the checkboxes that you would need to cross-reference your detections to, just like you would for like a MITRE attack framework, and be able to say, hey, I mapped all of our detections to this risk reference architecture. And it doesn't matter if it's the user, if it's the application, if it's the training data, the model data, we can monitor all of it with our security operations team. We can monitor all, we can write detections for all of these with KQL. And we may not have all the log sources right now to, do those detections, right? But that's an opportunity for us to go back to all of the AI centers of excellence that exist in all of these firms and say, hey, as the security professionals, we do actually have a reference architecture for you, developer human, who's probably just done a lot of AI training and really isn't a security specialist, to consider these use cases as you're building an AI agent, whether that agent is doing KQL detections, some of our conditional access use cases we were talking about earlier, or even things that people would build in Azure AI Foundry or Power Apps or anything that they would kind of invent on their own, right? It doesn't really matter. The goal is for this to be transversal across the different risk taxonomies and be, present across different parts of the AI infrastructure as it relates to cybersecurity. So you can consider this, if you are looking to build new detections or think about, a new project that you may be taking on at work around, how are we going to do AI monitoring? This is meant to be a blueprint for you. I also have this one, which I specifically focused on Power Platform for some of the talks that I was giving at Ignite. But the idea is this, we as cybersecurity people know all these green boxes are generic and would apply in any context. As a engineer, however, you may not be familiar with just how many green boxes there need to be in order to do good cybersecurity monitoring. So this is meant to be that blueprint to say, hey, if you are someone who's building applications or you're working with agents or the model layer or the training data itself that are being used by these agents, boy, do we have some green boxes we need you to send to this SIEM box at the bottom. And it's not all inclusive, and it's meant to be simplistic to more illustrate a point, right? That this really is a transversal problem. We have to be doing these log collection concepts and applying them in new context to people who are not security experts, because I do not scale. You do not scale, Alex, Gianni, you do not scale, right? And these types of basics need to make their way into the hands of more developers and more business analyst types of people so that they know what good looks like and they don't have to just invent stuff or use like weird workarounds to just try to get their jobs done, right? The idea is that if you want to get past the honeymoon phase, right, these are the new things that are, someone is going to ask you, hey, you have an AI agent, you just built it, on your own, you did it on your, okay, show me what your security monitoring blueprint looks like. I'm going to give you this reference architecture, fill yours in the way it is for your agent, and then, we can get to a place where we, check a box that says you're ready, for this agent to go live, right? And as I've been a SOC human, what I've realized that we have to offer back to everyone else is a security blueprint of how to do this stuff better, right? And out of each of these individual contexts that everyone else is operating in, right? To their, our earlier conversation about silos, about, well, the identity people know the identity stuff, and the infrastructure people know the infrastructure stuff, and the application people know the application stuff, right? The goal is for this to be the Rosetta Stone, right, for everybody. So thanks for giving me a couple minutes to share.
But you just mentioned all those logs, right? And I guess that's another challenge. Even if we said, we just use KQL, but I guess the magic or the challenge with all these AI is because there's not just one AI, right? There's AI
Right,
Foundry, there's Security Copilot. Users are creating a prompt. And basically, in any of these type of AI agent, AI frameworks, there are different type of logs, and you have to actually understand what logs do they produce, and what could I potentially get out of those logs, and whether something could be potentially risky. As an example, I just was going through the logs this evening, waiting until you came online. And I always do this, I just go to a random table and I say, distinct action type. And I bumped into one of them, right? So in the Cloud App events, there's actually a schedule prompt created. So whenever I figured by running this in a production environment, like, oh, okay, now you see the savvy users, right? Those users that create prompts. Now, first of all, of course, we do have a little bit of a privacy challenge here. But it also might, another detection method, well, people also might create prompts, or maybe an attacker might create a schedule prompt by basically setting this up on behalf of the user. And if you have maybe, a user who lives under the stone, although their company gave them, a Copilot license, but they never make it to Portal Office.
Sure.
They don't even know they are running a scheduled prompt, right?
Yeah.
And that scheduled prompt, or now with those workflow agents, you might be able to set up things, like, okay, go through all my emails, everything that looks sensitive, dump the data somewhere. But yeah, getting back to my point, I guess, on a very primitive level, it's also interesting to understand where does AI log its actions, and how can we monitor them?
Yeah, that's a whole other ball of wax, right? Even beyond, right, what are you, from a control points perspective, at least trying to collect, versus what are the outputs and what do you do with those outputs, I think introduces a huge other, how does it fit into your incident response plan? How is your incident response plan going to be different if you got hit by Sesame Op, right? And what actually got compromised was a library that's used in Visual Studio. Like there are some very real attack scenarios that are, if you've been doing cloud stuff for a while, or you're a DevOps person, you may have seen before. But if you haven't, this is a whole new world of investigations and SOPs of reaching back to parts of the organization that you may not have constant contact with. Right? As a SOC human, we have a good relationship with infrastructure. It's different than our relationship with engineering, different than our relationship with the architect people, right? And when these compromises happen at software library levels, right? And those software libraries are used by 6, 8, 10 different parts of your organization. The notification, escalation, and containment process for each of those 10 teams may be radically different. One may only work 8 to 5 and may not have anyone on call.
Speaking about containment, I mean, how would you contain? And we all know MDI, we can contain a user, we can contain a device. Let's suppose I see an AI agent going crazy. Can I contain that one? Yes, probably, because it has an identity.
This is a really interesting question. I'm so glad you asked me. You got me excited. So I have been thinking about this, and I was like, actually, I think the secret is in the Entra suite, right? And I think we've seen a lot of changes come through, like also around E3, E5, and now it's included in E3 and E5. I still think, right, two things are really important. One would be the conditional access for workloads, right? You could create if you had the Entra suite, right? You could create a series of conditional access policies directed at the workloads specifically that would be running those, those agents or whatever, right? So treat it like a non-human identity, form of, identity containment, right? But using this concept of workload identities and being able to apply conditional access policies to them. I also think about the network being a key place, right? Where we think about the actual, if there is an Azure front door, if there is some sort of, secure access, private internet, right, connection that's being leveraged to get information in or out, right? The choke point or our opportunity to contain things actually goes back to that network or firewall, kind of level where we're doing a lot of blocking and tackling of the ability of the agent to access the network and access any information, right? So it feels like we're kind of going back in the Stone Ages in some ways, right? But in some ways, blocking ports on the firewall is still just as effective as it was, 10 years ago. And I think having those types of ways of thinking about abstracting the agents back to their core components is something we as cybersecurity professionals can bring to this. It's almost like we're all playing. I don't know if you ever played that parlor game where they give you an object and you have to use it in a context that's not that thing as part of a joke. You can say, oh, this isn't a rubber band. This is a tool that's used to get to outer space. Every time you stretch it, it goes from one planet to another. So we're going to go to, here we are, now we're in Mars. Isn't it so crazy? There's aliens everywhere. Now we're in Mars. If I give this to you, what planet do you think you would want to go to, right? It's just almost kind of like abstracting like silly concepts. But I almost feel like taking those types of AI agents and taking them out of context and saying, oh, well, if this was, something else, how would we protect it is actually one of the cool things that we can bring to protecting AI agents for everybody else. So it's always good to be reflexive. We can't just talk about the AI agents we would want to use ourselves without being cybersecurity professionals and saying, well, if I was going to build my own agent, I also have to make it follow a risk framework. And I also have to make sure that it, has almost like a third-party risk management framework that goes along with it too. Otherwise, how would we ever say that these things are approved for use? Otherwise, I've just invented something that I never made a pipeline of whatever would get to production, which is honestly, I think, what a lot of us have suffered from if we've tried to like make, what my boss calls toy AI agents, just to demonstrate that they work.
Cool.
I know we're almost out of time, but yeah, if there's anything else you guys wanted to chat about, definitely let me know.
Say something, Gianni, otherwise you have to cut the
So
silence out of the video.
Shut us down, Gianni. It's okay, man.
No. Let's continue. If you would use AI, but not the Microsoft AI, which AI would you use?
Wait, not the Microsoft AI? I have to use a different one?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Oh, Claude.
Claude? Okay.
Yeah, I feel like I have like when I'm doing like conversational chit-chatty AI, I think I still would choose ChatGPT. Like I don't know if you guys are commuters or like find yourself in a closed scenario like where you're in your car or something like that for decent amounts of time. I use it as a time to learn. Like I just chat with the AI agent while I'm driving, and I'm just like, oh, teach me about this. I want to learn about something else. Tell me about this new thing that came out or whatever. And I find ChatGPT does a little bit better job with that. But technical things, reference documents, making a lot of that kind of stuff, I mostly go to Claude.
Okay, cool.
What about you guys? I want to know your answers.
To be honest, I always hear about all those difference, even with, reasoning. Okay, I can understand. And there was this mini and 04 and whatsoever. To be honest, I'm
Alex
not really
lost.
into
like,
all the LLM and the specific details and whatsoever.
Literally swap it out. Alex does not care if he's getting in a car or a van or a prison truck. He's just like, get in. I'm going to get in. It's going to drop me off where I want to go. I don't care.
I would hope that one day and I don't even know if I'm now telling rubbish or if it's related, but I saw this talk from Satya Nadella where he was talking about some democratizing, different AI models, and where basically, you would ask a question and they would kind of, do some sort of, each one would go off on their own, and then they will do some voting, and in the very end, the whole idea is that, and I'm not, no, I hope nobody watches this video and thinks like, oh, he totally did not get it, but with my 1 year listening to his speech, I think this is what he was going to demonstrate, that you have multiple LLMs doing their stuff, and in the end, they're going to figure out among themselves, what
who's the
is
best one to answer the question. Yeah. We've already started doing that at Capgemini. We have AI agents that help you pick the right models and AI for your application, right?
Yeah.
And do a lot of the even like product development, like testing, types of things. We tested all these models, so you don't have to, right? These ones were approved for our use, so you could probably use them too if you trust the way that we measure these things, right? So I think we're going to see a lot of that too.
Yeah, and I think
these AI agents or models are approved for use in these environments because some government entities said it was okay, some legal entities said it was okay, some overarching third party, not-for-profit said it was okay. But yeah.
But I would also hope that this is going to happen because think, what we discussed before, why waste or burn oil for an SCU or for capacity if maybe a cheaper, for my for my budget, but also, for our environment to not, burn, like I don't take maybe in America you guys do, but I don't take a car to go just around the corner to the grocery store, right? Yeah, I take my bike, right? Because I think of the environment, and I think it's the same with AI, right? Why would I have somewhere in a data center spin up a huge?
Just for the sake of revving your engine or idling your car, or whatever. So, I definitely feel like I have seen this evolution and change in this, like, do you want Coke or do you want Pepsi or do you want like Fanta, right? But like at some point the market can only sustain so many choices. And I think some consumers, like apparently Alex, right, have already decided that even the concept of there being, multiple flavors of soda, right, is maybe even too many choices, right? And maybe, something simpler is a better design. But yeah, I mean, I think that this idea of like what kind of domain specificity, what sort of depth versus breadth, right? This idea of everybody having a mega chat bot, right, that's available to them at work versus, a multi-agent chat scenario. I think Alex is a really good indicator of like what regular people are kind of capable of. And even so, like still some adoption rates and things like that are, if you are only looking for people who know how to build things, you're really just not going to get a major population of people to adopt this stuff. If you change people's ways of giving them their time back or giving them more visibility or giving them more transparency, right, then suddenly I think people will start recognizing this stuff is better. But I don't think we're there yet. I do have to drop for a call now, so I have to tie this up with you guys. But it was a pleasure chatting, and I always love the opportunity to get insights from brilliant leaders like yourselves. And I do look forward to hopefully seeing you guys in the Netherlands in January.
We will.
Definitely.
Great. Talk to you guys soon. Thanks for the time.
Okay. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.